Well, g'day everyone. It's the Two Ordinary Cops, and we're back yet again. And mate, I had to hold myself back from laughing. But mate, how are you, Damo?
I'm stoked, Schultzy. I'm stoked. So, mate, this was weird because this is a last minute thing. We had a bit of a plan for tonight, and I got a random phone call, and that blew tonight out of the water. So we've got a guest that we're stoked about and before he says anything, I've got to hold him back because the man can talk.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so this is a bloke who has been on the force, what, three times, I think. Don't say anything yet. We'll talk in a minute. So he's been on the force two, three times. Was an extremely popular member of the NT police force. Was a fellow who came down to Katherine in about 2011 and took over as a detective sergeant of the budding Northern Investigation Section. Having been quite famous from the original Commander's tactical team in Darwin, which is now Strike Force Trident, which I've worked in as well. Um, Came down to Tennant Creek when I was there as well, so we worked together in Katherine, Tennant Creek, and Alice Springs. But everywhere he went was a good time. Was a lot of work. We worked hard, like really hard, and then we played really hard. So
Yep.
I'm stoked to introduce our extremely good old mate, the former Detective Sergeant Andy Bedwell, mate. Welcome to the Two Ordinary Cops. It's only taken 2 years. You're on. You
Yeah,
can talk.
I, I need no encouragement, Damo. And just to clear things up, the obscure phone call was because I had a dream about Damo last night, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, he
It
told me all
wasn't
about
weird
it.
at all.
It was very
I thought I'd
romantic.
better ring
Yeah.
him.
Too
I'm,
good.
I'm just I'm just surprised I wasn't in there somewhere.
Schultzy, I'm sure you were. There's no question about it. You'd have been under the covers somewhere.
Oh, this is great. Look, the reason I'm so happy about this is because so many of my stories, so many of the things we've spoken about, I know that Schultzy, I know you guys were good mates as well, but me and Andy worked together constantly. Like we were constantly working together for years. And like Andy's now out of the job as well over in WA. But yeah, we kicked off our sort of mateship in Katherine, and I think we were mates within the first 5 minutes of meeting. It was just we sort of knew of each other because it's a very small place, so we knew of each other, and then it was just bloody good times, mate, and lots of work. Holy Jesus, we worked a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think Andy, instead of us talking, we're just going to hand over, mate. Do
Yeah,
you want to
yeah.
tell us your policing journey?
Listen, oh, man, without boring your viewers, there's a lot more interesting people out there than me. But certainly, I agree with everything you've said, Damo. Both of you two were a huge part of not just my policing career, but my life. Catherine is a place. I'm married. I've got a very, very beautiful, very tolerant wife who followed me around some of the wildest places in Australia. So before I started with the NT Police, I was with the West Australian Police. In the West Australian Police, I did mostly remote policing. So I was in Kununurra, Wyndham, Ulmulgurry, those sort of places, Carton, Schultzy,
Yeah.
and yeah, Carton. Um, yeah, so remote policing was where I was at. My family have been dragged around. My kids were born in different parts of the Northern Territory, um, and so that's policing. But yeah, both of you were a huge part of that. Catherine is one of our favourite places when we look back. Absolutely brilliant place to work. But busy. Yeah, we did. With Tennant Creek was also really busy. Alice Springs always busy. But look, that period of time in Katherine was wild. At that period of time, and I'm not sure whether most people realise this, statistically speaking, the Northern Territory experienced the most murders per capita than anywhere in the world. There have been things that have curbed that since that period of time, but at that period of time. And again, I don't know whether you know or have quoted these statistics, but during that period of time in Katherine, there was a 4 month period there where we had 44 sudden deaths. 17 of those were homicides. And the funny thing was, you guys will remember, the news that we used to get in Katherine wasn't from the Northern Territory. We always used to get Queensland or Melbourne news. And there'd be there was a murder in a park last night in somewhere downtown Melbourne. And we'd go, yeah, we had 3 of those last week. and and that was kind of that period of time. I mean, we had some obscure jobs, right? There was jobs. And another thing most people don't realise, those investigation sections, like the Northern Investigation Section out of Katherine, and the investigation section out of Tennant Creek, which was the Barclay Investigation Section, I believe, they covered enormous areas. I mean, we covered from basically Katherine. I'm talking about. We covered from basically Elliot in the south. I'll do the east-west next, border to border, so West Australian border to Queensland border, the entirety of Arnhem Land. But in the most obscure thing was we also included the islands that were less than an hour from Darwin.
Yeah.
So we would sometimes fly over Darwin to go and do a job in the islands off Arnhem Land. And I mean, I'm grateful for it because we got to see some cool stuff and we got to see some cool places. To this day, I can't believe we got paid to do what we did.
Yep.
It was great fun and just an incredible experience. Great people, enormous camaraderie, and you're right. Like, we worked really hard, really, really hard. And that was. Let me just say something here that's for your regular viewers to understand. You two were two of the hardest workers that I had working with me. And you weren't the only ones. There were lots of hard workers, but not everybody worked hard. There were genuinely people who just got the job, that were prepared to just turn up and go. We would. One of the most frustrating things as a detective sergeant, I know you know this, Damo, just Schultzy, you were a sergeant as well, but as a detective sergeant, especially when you work task force work, you'll get that phone call at ridiculous o'clock. You need to put together a team. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You're running on vapors. You're trying to organise stuff. There's high emotions going on. You pick up the phone, and all you want to hear at the other end of the phone is, "Hey, boss, what's on? Where do I need to be?" And that I got straight away from both of you two, always, which is why a call out to you two was a pleasure. But it doesn't always go that way, Damo. You know it.
Yeah.
There's always that copper that wants to dip test the job before they say yes. But most of the people we worked with weren't like that, and it was good, man. They were great times. I don't experience that. I don't get that in civilian life now. Like some of the people, I've had to really moderate that. That when the job's on, you call up and you just go, and people around you just dig in and go. That's something I really noticed when I went to civilian life, was that people weren't prepared to do that. People like their hours and they clock watch, and they don't like it when they're called upon to work hard, right?
Yeah, mate. It's funny you talk about. Sorry, Schultzy, I'll leave you in a minute. It's just that those Katherine days. That was my first time working with you, and it was just, mate. I'll tell you the number one thing we did every single shift about 3,000 times, and I bedwelled that. There's a term there. I bedwelled that a bit. Was we laughed our ass off. We laughed, belly laughed. We threw our heads back in the chair and lost control of our emotions, laughing at shit that we were talking about in the office. And we were dealing with some of the most serious, traumatic shit you can possibly imagine. Those laughs were never, ever at the expense of a victim, or they were never at a job. It was just the team blowing off steam in an explosion. That's all it was, and it had nothing to do with the job most of the time. But, Schultzy, have you got? So I was going to ask, do you want to go over a couple of those jobs that we dealt, if you can remember them? Yeah, Schultzy, do you have something?
Yeah, mate.
Sorry, there you go.
Before you go on, Andy, I think, and we've spoken about it on the podcast before, we lived the job. It was our lifestyle. We were there for a reason, and I think we all had that dedication to do the job. And it was the same thing. Like, you really love those people, working with them because it's just so motivated. Everybody just wants to get in there, get it done. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. And like, it's some of the best memories I will ever have is those days in Katherine. But mate, do you want to go over some of the jobs that we tackled?
Yeah. Well, while we're in Katherine, and Damo just reminded me of something about that. But before I run a couple of, like, just a series of stories here. Damo, you're 100% right about sense of humour. One of the most valuable lessons I ever got was from one of my first ever sergeants. I was West Australian Police in Perth, just about to be shipped to Kununurra, and I had an old sergeant, Sergeant Johnson is his name. Rest in peace. He's passed away now. But he said to me one night, he said, if I can give you one piece of advice, I mean, I'm sure this guy could have given me 1,000,000, but he said, I'm going to sum this job up in one. He said, never, ever, ever take the job so seriously that you can't laugh at the end of the day. And I think that was the best piece of advice I ever got, because the job will eat you up if you don't find a way to laugh at what you do.
Oh, yeah.
And we sure found a lot.
Yeah.
Mate.
Yeah, we sure did.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I tell you, right in the midst of that crazy period we were talking about there at Catherine, I can remember, and again, not to take away from the seriousness of jobs, I got called one night, one like early hours of one morning, say, look, I need you to fly. You've got to fly out to Borroloola. We've got a missing kid out there in Borroloola, and it was just post I'm careful of using names, but there was a job in Borroloola just before this where there was a kid that was found drowned, and there was, later on there was a lot of effort. You guys will be aware of the job, and I don't want to go over too much because there was a lot of politics that happened with that job. But as a result of that particular job, we got called out for this missing kid. Now, tragically, this turned out to be a drowning, and it was everything about this job was tragic from day one. But just to give you an idea of what happens when you go on these jobs, you fly out to a place like Borroloola. You don't fly on the kind of planes that you watch when you watch those shows. We don't have Lear jets and citations to fly out of these places. You get on a bug smasher with a kid who got his license 2 days ago, and still smells of the grog he was drinking at 2 a.m. the night before. And he's flying you into these airstrips, and oftentimes in the middle of the wet season when it's the worst time of year, and you're flying, you bounce like a cork, and you land up there. And like, I went out there with 2 days worth of stuff. I had a go bag and a go box, which I'm sure you boys would have had as well, ready to go at any stage, and we'd go out there with that, nothing. Well, I ended up out there for 2.5 weeks. I got stuff flown out to me at the time, but to keep me rolling. But anyway, there was a lot that went on with this job. The kid was found drowned. The kid had a very tragic past. He was being brought up by his brother and his wife. There was a lot of tragedy about this story. But as is always the way, right in the midst of that job, we get a phone call to say there's been 2 sudden infant deaths. One in it's one of the camps in town at Borroloola. Damo, you'll know it better because you work there. Yeah. Middle camp, I think it was, or there's one on the other side of the river. Yeah, Murra camp, that's it. And then one out at Robinson River. And as you'll know, Robinson River's not an easy trek. That's right out on the Queensland border. So anyway, just to add complication to all of this, SIDS is tragic, it's awful, but not an overly complicated thing to have to deal with as a detective. Unless both kids just happen to get their vaccinations by the same doctor in Borroloola within days of the death. And then when we did an investigation into that, it turns out both sets of vaccinations had been recalled prior to them being given because of something. So nothing is ever simple. You go out there to deal with one job, you end up with 4 jobs to deal with at the time. Not to mention, those, like, I take my hat off here to anyone who works those remote communities. Both of you two have done it. Schultzy, you made a career out of working those 1, 2, and 3-man stations. Like, that would have to be the wildest policing anywhere in the world. You guys are everything. You're the sheriff, you're the marriage counsellor, you're the undertaker, you're the football coach, you're the kids counsellor, you're the school counsellor, and I'm naming half these jobs: search and rescue coordinator, ranger, major works operator, SES coordinator. I mean, it's just everything going on. And on top of that, you're expected to deal with jobs and conduct investigations that city blokes would have detectives available to work on. And compliments where compliments are due. Schultzy, you did amazing work out there in creating files and things that, showed some of your investigation training.
I
That
had
came
good
through.
bosses, Andy.
You were a good boss, but look, it that just went on and on that job, and I can remember we flew back in on a plane on that plane, and I'd missed my and it just I'm not after sob story here. In the time I was gone there, my wife and my daughter at the time, who was only 2 years old, had to fly to Perth because they'd prearranged flights to go there. So I missed them going to Perth and landed back in to Catherine by myself. I was exhausted, but no rest for the wicked, right? So, and I don't know whether you remember this job, Damo, but like literally the night I landed, the day that we got back and landed, there was that really tragic job where that bloke ran over his kid in the driveway of his house. It was horrible. Like
Yeah.
that's the worst kind of job to deal with. Do you remember that one day, mate?
Yeah, so I'd come back from leave because the Borroloola job I missed. I didn't
Yeah,
go. I'd been on leave. I got back from leave and you were just coming back from Borroloola.
yeah,
And the very next day, and I remember vividly how that job started because I was on the road with someone in the car. It wasn't you, it was someone else.
yeah. It was a
And there
shoot.
was a call for it was a call for a traffic offender, like a
Yeah,
really fast drive, dangerous driver in Catherine. And I remember, to his absolute credit, Shorty Watkinson, and I'll name him because he don't care.
superstar. Nah,
So he called it in and said, they're driving towards the hospital, just stand by. I'm going to overtake him and go to the hospital. So Shorty must have floored it and gone past this guy and got to the hospital. And then sure enough, the car pulled in right behind him and basically almost crashed into the door at the emergency department and ran screaming. This is heavy, but this is how it
yeah.
is. Ran screaming into the front counter of the Catherine Hospital with his 18-month-old daughter in his hands, and I won't describe what her head looked like.
Nah, not a pleasant job all round. And look, to pick up on your story there, Damo, from my perspective, I'd come back in. I was getting the drum on this job. It went from being a fail to stop pursuit scenario to a hospitalisation to a kid that was clearly deceased, and there was that kind of rolls as it is. You don't know what's going on. Your job now is to find facts. But I tell you something, I'd run on no sleep and vapors for 2 weeks. And I can remember, this is where mateship comes into play and you pick it up. But Damo, I don't know whether you can recall this, but it was one of the most relieving things in my life. You walked into that office and you said to me, I've got this one boss, as in to go and deal with the kid in the hospital. I had a daughter the same age.
Yeah.
I was physically exhausted. And from I've heard you guys do really good work around PTSD and things like that, and everybody deals with it differently. And I on that note here, just for anybody that's out there to feel it, I can tell you that night in that job that I can remember calling to speak to my wife, who was in Perth, and her mum picked up the phone. And my wife's Zimbabwean, and mum's was a former trauma nurse from over there, and very worldly people. They went through enough tragedies themselves, and she picked up something and said, "Oh, what's going on?" and spoke to her. I ended up like a baby in tears for an hour on the phone to her, just releasing. There was so much that had gone on. We dealt with contract killings at that stage. We dealt
Yeah.
with all sorts of mad and but that particular job, literally at the end of 2 weeks of no sleep, it was just there. I'd already dealt with 2 child deaths, and then it came into that one, and that was a breaking point for me. And that kind of that intermingled with some fabulously funny and raucous and strange jobs.
Oh yeah.
Was kind of what defined in Catherine at that time. I mean, there was, oh, man, and we haven't even touched on Tennant Creek yet. or
No.
Alice Springs, or anything from Command TAC Team or Strike Force Trident. But I think that's probably something for me. People, you and I were talking earlier today, Damo, about missing the job, and you probably gave me one of the best analogies I've ever heard on what it's like. I don't know whether you've shared it before, but it's
No, share it, mate. You can own it.
no,
We'll
I
just
won't
coined
do
it.
it justice. How
Ah,
did you
you say it.
describe
It'll be right. Yeah.
it?
No,
You
you say it,
describe.
no, mate. You say it the
Yeah,
best.
you do say it.
Right.
You did say it good.
Yeah. So people ask, do you miss the job? And I go, I miss the job like a widower misses their deceased wife. I'm head over heels in love with a job that no longer is alive. It's no longer exists. So I'm a professional widower. So there's no point. There's no point going, oh, I'll just go back. It's like she doesn't exist, mate. She doesn't
Yeah,
exist. So it's like I want my wife back. It's well, your wife doesn't exist. So I want
yeah,
my job back. No, the job is not the same job. It's a different job.
yeah,
So we're talking about back in those days, mate. It, those jobs were. I cannot comprehend the fact that the three of us aren't just crippled with PTSD. The amount of shit. But we're not. But we're not. That's
no,
the thing. We're not. And I put it down to the camaraderie, the fact that shared experience, that normalization of a tragic situation, the fact that any reaction was fine. It didn't matter. That talk about the old saying safe space. I can't stand that word by the way. Anyway, you want to know a safe space? A CIB office in Catherine in 2011. That was a safe space.
yeah,
There
right.
was no offending anyone. You could say anything you wanted in there, and everyone. You could swear. You could say the most obscene shit. You could completely dump on anyone you needed. As if you were pissed off with bosses, pissed off with crooks. It was the ultimate safe space. And then you put your big boy pants back on and you go back to work.
Yep.
So it was, mate. It was a great show.
I reckon you've hit the nail on the head on something there, Damo. And it's funny how we don't tolerate that language. And I don't want to get into uh, politics and ideologies. The world's divided enough on this nonsense. But what I will say is there's definitely what I don't like is this notion of victimhood. And I think I actually was talking about this with a mate of mine, an ex-South African police officer the other night. And I just said, you know, I think I've cottoned on to why it is we really can't stand this victimhood that's going on in the world at the moment. Everyone's a victim. I think it's because we dealt with real victims. So
Yeah.
we know what a victim is. And when people are claiming that they're a victim of circumstance, like nothing in the world is their own responsibility. Everything's somebody else's fault. Not, like I said, I don't want to get on a soapbox and get into this, but that kind of sums it up. And you know what? That's what is the change in the job as well.
Yeah.
And again, don't want to get bogged down in ideology, but what the job has changed. And look, it's not about whether it's changed for the better or for the worst. It's just irreversibly changed. And it doesn't, we couldn't police the way we used to police now. It just wouldn't work. And that's not because, I'm going to say this right here and now, and I don't care what anybody thinks about it. I was never a crooked cop. I hated crooked cops. And I don't have a qualm in saying that. If you're a cop and you committed a crime, I'll take you down like any other criminal.
Yep.
But the way in which policing has changed since, and I'll say it, Black Lives Mattered, and it's got nothing to do with the politics of that either, because the politics of Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with black and white.
No.
That changed everything. We went from being trusted members of the community, sheriffs, people that people looked up to, that we could be trusted, to suddenly our voice didn't mean anything, our word didn't matter anymore. There was no, like, we went to policing with more rules placed on us than the people that we were trying to police. And you know what? There should have been more time spent on rooting out the rotten apples than policing the whole of society. It's a little bit like the change in gun laws here in Western Australia. Once again, we've changed it to punish the populace for the behaviour of a few, and we miss that, and I think that's really missing. That and we've spoken about this before, Damo, DEI. So that's this is a passion topic of mine, not least because it's the study area for me, leadership, but leadership is something that's massively missing. It started going in my time in police, and it went. I don't know what happened to it. For thousands upon thousands of years, we worked out how to pick leaders based on who was the leader. Our local footy clubs can still pick leaders based on who is actually a leader. And we just threw that script out, and we started to promote our leaders based on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. They're all nice things to have. They're great. We should be diverse. We should be equitable. We should be inclusive. But it shouldn't be at the expense of leadership and quality direction. And that's, quite frankly, that's what's missing in our police force, because we stopped picking leaders because they were leaders, and we started picking leaders based upon exam results filtered by a series of DEI filters. And what we ended up with was poor leadership who then broke trust. That the academics will all talk about that. The first thing that you lose when you lose good leadership is trust, and when you lose trust, then you lose accountability, because they both run together. When you lose accountability, that's when you lose control of the masses. Now we've got to start policing the police, and they can blame everything else in the world for this, but corruption starts with poor leadership. If you've got a corrupt police force, have a look at your leadership. And that's it. I'll get off my soapbox now, boys. We can get back to laughing, talking about my dream about Damo.
Andy, I might just cut in there just on one thing.
Yeah.
One thing that really got me, especially towards the end, and I think I've told this story before, but I was out at Ramangini, I came into Catherine, and I saw one of the people I knew, and they were just leaving at the end of shift, and I said, "Oh, you must be going over to the club, to catch up with the crew." He said, "No, just going home." I said, "Well, what are the rest of the crew doing?" And she goes, "Oh no, they've still got jobs to do. Like, this one's got another job." And I'm going, back in our day, nobody left until all the jobs were done.
Yeah.
And it was that the same thing that really, I suppose, there was a couple of jobs, and I was capable of doing them when I was out bush, but I didn't have the time to do them. They were definitely on the next level, detective level, to do. And I tried to get somebody to take them on. Like, back when you guys were working Northern Investigations, if I rang you up, yep, not a problem, we'll take that one, we'll get it dealt with. Because you guys were overworked, but you just get the job done. I did the same, when you called me up when I was working DVU. And I put it through, and they said, no, you're going to have to do it. I'm going, I don't have the time. I've got to run a police station, I've got to run 2 communities, I've got crime coming, out of my ass, and then you've got all the extra paperwork I have to do because of what you said, because they put extra requirements on you to do all this stuff. And it just burnt me out in the end. And there wasn't that backup, that camaraderie that we had.
And it comes down to one word. It's the big L word. It became loyalty, and it became almost a taboo subject. They literally were starting to lecture about it at police academies and colleges around. We don't do this anymore. We don't run loyalty. We don't run. And I'm really sorry. Corruption should be stamped out. There's no question about it. Poor behaviour should absolutely be called out. But that's the job of your peers, your mentors, your supervisors. This business of turning every junior constable into a triple C mouthpiece is ludicrous. And, we went from the first thing we learn as detectives is that you don't start laying accusations without evidence. But the complete opposite started happening in police. We just started laying accusations. There was no, the rules of evidence didn't count. The rule of natural justice just didn't count. And all of a sudden, we broke down loyalty. And we forget that when you're working, and people just don't understand this about the Northern Territory. I speak to police officers here in Western Australia now about this. You know, they've got stations with 20 and 30 in them right next door to each other. I mean, there's remote stations, you know, up north and out east in Western Australia that are still fairly small, but nothing's, there's another police station within a short distance to get there. But everywhere you worked in the Northern Territory, you did it short-manned. You did it with no staff. You did it sometimes and often alone in those remote stations and remote places. I mean, I think when we were working in the SED units and the cross-border team down in Alice Springs, I mean, we would go two up in a Land Cruiser and do 3,000 kilometres out across the South Australian, West Australian, Northern Territory borders. I mean, we often didn't have phone range, certainly no radio range. You were literally on your own. Yeah. And people forget this. You have to count on that person standing next to you. So I don't know how the hell a young police officer does it today. If you can't trust the person standing next to you, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I don't want to get on soapboxes, but in leadership, you know, when we're talking about the academics of leadership, I did my master's thesis studying great leaders, and I looked at characteristics of what those great leaders had. And when you hear people like Colin Powell, who led Desert Storm, went on to become Secretary of State, you know, he's a foremost expert on leadership in the world. And he had a series of, there's a great video you can see of him being interviewed by a bunch of interns at the White House. And one of these interns says to him, what is the greatest quality a leader can have? And before this kid even finishes the word have, Colin Powell says trust. And the same thing was said when Simon Sinek spent time with SEAL Team 6, not just the Navy SEALs, SEAL Team 6. He said SEAL Team 6 commander said to him, the most important quality we look for in a Navy SEAL is not fitness, not strength, it's trust. And he defines it this way: trust you have trust in your mates in the heat of the moment, in the heat of battle. But more importantly, you trust that guy will look after your wife back home when you're not there. And he said we've got all these metrics to measure performance, but we've got no metrics to measure trust. And he said we'll take people in SEAL Team 6 of high trust and only medium performance over somebody of high performance and high trust. He said we know the person of high performance, low trust. Everyone knows the person with high performance, low trust. We call them the fuckwit.
Yes.
Everyone knows them.
Yep.
Everyone knows them. But what we're creating in the modern police force is an entire scenario. It's a paramilitary unit that's designed to keep people safe. That's the motto of just about every police force in the Western world. And it's becoming increasingly more militant, and it's becoming increasingly more violent. I mean, the Northern Territory's always been a violent place to police. But you can't go into battle if you don't trust the person standing next to you. So to me, if we're not teaching loyalty, you may as well kiss the job goodbye. This is why we've got breakdown. This is why coppers are leaving in droves. This is why we're not performing out there in the field and we're not getting jobs done anymore. It's because we've forgotten the basics. This job is built on trust and accountability. And that's what the camaraderie is about, boys. That's what it was like when we were sitting at the station. And it wasn't every Friday afternoon that we would sit and have a beer back at the end of the week. Oftentimes you wouldn't get it for 3 weeks because you'd be working around the clock. People don't get this.
No.
When the NIST, I won't mention names, when we had the contract killing homicide in Catherine, man, when the bells dropped on that job, I did not go to bed in my own bed for 14 days.
Yeah.
I went 3 days, no sleep.
Do you remember how that job started?
I do, Damo. Well, I remember the night before, Damo.
Tell that story, Andy.
Are you tedding me, former Detective Sergeant?
Tell me more about that.
Explain
Explain
to
to
me.
me.
Describe
Describe
that for me.
exactly. Show
No,
me. Yeah.
so listen, we I explain. It was a particularly busy period of time. We had a really, really busy period of time. And the victim of this particular crime had actually been subject of some stuff that we had to deal with over time. And in fact, during the day, there'd been some strange stuff go on. It's getting dark here, boys. I'm turning the lights on.
Hold on.
I thought you were just putting on mood lighting.
Yeah, sun setting. Yeah, there's just been there was something strange that was going on in the air. But anyway, it had been busy. So we decided we'd have a couple of beers. Anyway,
Do you remember
Damo,
why?
being, I'm going to get to that.
Right,
Damo, being Damo, decided to have a birthday. So Damo, so we had beers for Damo, and we know Damo, he's good. Like Damo can drink all night. He doesn't, he doesn't take much. He stays fairly steady most of the night.
Yeah, that's all bullshit.
Good.
Yeah.
He's great the next morning.
Oh,
Anyway, that call out, Damo was in no shape for that call
no,
out.
you've confused him up. No, sorry.
Is this-
I'll fix you.
am I
No,
call- is it that one?
Nisaforo was my birthday. So what had happened was we'd
That's
gone to
right.
work
We
that
were all
day.
supposed to
It
be
was
at your
my birthday. We had gone, right, boys, we've got a lull. And it's Barb's birthday. We're gonna knock it away at midday, and we're all going. The entire
Correct.
investigation section, because we'll tell that story in a minute. That was Tennant Creek, but yeah, we'll tell that story shortly.
Oh no,
I do the same
it
thing.
was Tennant Creek. No, and it is also they also melds into the rush to hospital for Damo's gout problems that often used to happen as well. I'll leave that one on. Yes, the Tennant Creek one is a very funny story, so remind me about that one, Schultzy, because job itself was, wow, that was a strange job too. But anyway, yeah, the Nisoforo job came in. Look, there's been a body found. The GD's guys are going out to look at it. And I remember Clint Sims at the time saying to me, I think you better go and have a look at this. There's something strange. There's strange stuff going on. We're getting reports of something going on at this guy Nisoforo's house. And we didn't know he was the victim at the time, but there was strange stuff going on over there. And later on, that works out to be part of this job. But yeah, I get out there and it's immediately obvious that we're not going home anytime soon. I mean, that was this was a proper job to find a body in a culvert by a farmer who was just happened to be grading his fire trail and came across his body wrapped in blankets, tied up, hole in the head. That was then, that was one wild fortnight. And that job itself was a bizarre job. I'm going to be a bit careful here, and Damo, feel free to chime in to correct me. But there are still aspects of that job that people. There are still parties still dealing with it, and so I'm going to be particularly careful and sensitive around that.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a very interesting job at a period of time. I think there's separate podcasts and separate things that sort of relate to that job that either are or in the throes. But yeah, I'll reserve making any comment other than the fact it was one of the more professional investigations I've been involved in. It was one that Northern Investigation and our particular team. A lot of us went on to work at Major Crime at different times for things, but it worked. We worked in seamlessly with Major Crime. It was a long job. It just every time we thought we'd get a rest period, there was a break and something strange that went on with it. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Now some of the more amazing detective work went on in that job. And all I'll say about it was there was a hell of a lot more that we knew about in that job that we just eventually couldn't get into evidence.
Couldn't prove. You know what you know, what you can prove, and we couldn't prove it.
We definitely could prove enough to get the murder convictions, but
of course,
there's a lot more evidence that went on. There were other jobs, Damo, definitely where that was the case. But yeah, look, that was a particularly interesting job, and I'm just going to leave it alone for a bit because there's a bit that's still going on with that in the background. Not to mention, I believe there's an offender still attached to that job that I would love to see still come to justice.
Me too.
And, you know, I often talk to other senior detectives at major crime that's still there now, and we've chatted in the past about loving to still bring that particular individual to justice. But look, let's talk about far more interesting and fun things. But we were Tennant Creek was one of the stranger places I've ever worked. Affectionately known as TFC. I mentioned that Catherine was one that my family loved more than any place we worked. Conversely, Tennant Creek is one that my wife would be happy never to ever see again. It's a particularly strange place.
Andy, don't knock my party town.
Schultzy, you only ever brought joy and fun to Tennant Creek in your fly out visits.
We've told the story, mate, how Schultzy was the only bloke I've ever known who's driven to what was only meant to be a piss-up and claimed about, 15 hours overtime on the Barclay Investigation Unit overtime code. And they're like, hang on, this guy's attached to Raminginning Police Station. How's that right? And it's like, hey, look, legit, trust me, the guy worked like a dog.
And look, just to put Tennant Creek into perspective, right? Tennant Creek's a town of 3,000 people. 500 of those are service workers. So by that I mean police officers, a couple of fireys, ambulance officers, nurses, doctors, and others. Then there's about 500 to 1,000 residents that live there and work there. And so the rest of those are locals. Are the Aboriginal population of Tennant Creek and surrounds, to make up 3,000 people. That town has, at last count, over 50 cops, and at the time I was working there were 44. I had 7 in an investigations unit in that town. I had over 180 CAT investigations, so Child Abuse Task Force investigations. Over 180 for a town of 3,000 people. So it'll give you, people don't get these statistics when they look at places like Tennant. But I would have to say there was, like, the one thing about policing and particularly investigations is nothing is ever as it seems. Everything is always more obscure, and when you think you've seen the strangest thing you could possibly see, something even stranger occurs. And I can remember, so I'm going to tell a story about Damo and making it the next day. But Tennant Creek wasn't a place that you did much more than work, and then kind of debrief and have a few drinks. That was about Tennant Creek in a nutshell. Occasionally mixed up with going out in the scrub and shooting. Yep. Donkeys and whatever. There was some beautiful surrounds to Tennant Creek. It kind of contradicted the town. But I remember, Damo, we got a call, and I don't know whether you can remember the job because it had been a particularly big night the night before, that it finished somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning, and we got a call out early in the morning for an obscure job. I don't know whether you remember correctly, but essentially it would be a terrorist job today. So this bloke had placed the LPG gas cylinder into the sidewall of a house and set it alight with the intention of blowing the house up in this domestic incident. And I mean, it was just obscure that these things would happen. So we're going there to investigate both I don't even know where you start with even labelling a job like this. It's an explosive. It's an adapted explosive device. It's attempted arson. It's possibly attempted murder.
Well, it wasn't arson. So we had arson in the bed, but we had very serious domestic violence offences. Sorry, keep going, mate.
No. You are right, but that's what I mean. Nothing was ever straightforward. You turn up for what you thought was an arson job that turns out to be a bloke trying to literally try and blow up a house using an incendiary device. homemade, albeit, but the potential to not just take out one house, but probably several, had it actually gone off the way he intended. I think it literally turned out later that he couldn't get his lighter working.
Yeah, something stupid.
And
Yeah.
that was the only reason that stopped this whole thing from being catastrophic. But in any case, Damo and I are doing a field interview with the victim, who was a lovely young girl. Damo's behind the camera, and I'm doing my TEDs, standing there. Anyway, Damo looks at me, and he's slowly turning from his usual pink to a stale green and yellow colour, and he's going, we're going to go. And so I'm trying to seamlessly go to this guy. Oh, I'm just going to take the camera from Damien just while we do this. And now I'm doing selfie interviews. And then in the background, we hear this. Damo didn't even make the garden behind it. So this entire interview is just written off with Damo throwing up in the background.
Oh, mate, I was so sick. So that job could not have timed itself worse, because I think it happened in the very early hours, like 5 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
So we were called out pretty quick. So it wasn't even something that was a bit old or something that was still being dealt with. It was literally jobs on. Fucking jobs on. There are no excuses. We're not calling the other team because you're the only team. So it was just jobs on, and we don't care what you're like. And mate, I remember we get driven down there because we were still just terribly under the weather. Like, it was
something like that. I can't remember, or it was something even obscure because we'd been doing some surveillance work, and we might have actually been in the fire truck, the tender, the Hilux, or something. Rings a bell there.
It just wouldn't surprise me. It was weird.
Yeah.
The only thing I remember about that job was being so sick that I was just no good to anybody. It was just a rough time. And the thing is, I don't do that anymore. I can't. I can't survive doing that shit. But back then I loved it. I'd get into it all the time. But then I was a terrible hungover person. I just couldn't deal with it. Mate, talking about what I loved about what you brought to Tennant was Tennant Creek is very busy. The town of Tennant Creek is very busy. But like you very appropriately said at the beginning, it was the Barclay investigation section, which means our area. You spoke about Northern Command, so you spoke about where we used to go in Northern Command. Basically, if you draw a line through the town of, well, it's actually more like Daly Waters. If you draw a line through Daly Waters and go south to north of Tea Tree, if you want to look at a map, and then go border, and then draw a big line through the middle, a big thick section through the middle with Tennant Creek basically in the middle of it. That is the Barclay investigation section area. It goes up and covers the Barclay Highway all the way out to Avon Downs. It covers a lot of that obscure country out. It doesn't quite go to the border up north because Largemana is covered by Catherine just for access reasons, but it covers down further as well and not quite Yuendamu. So all that Tanami country, not that there's a lot out there, but if someone went missing there, that was our baby, and everything else. But we included a little community called Ali Karung. I knew you'd laugh because, mate, Ali Karung, it delivered some of the wildest. I say to this day, the most evil offending. I can't remember if you were there or not, but the most evil offending I've ever seen from an Aboriginal person occurred in Ali Karung. And I've spoken about it before where I think it might have been after or before your time. I can't remember. Well, maybe you were there. I'm not sure. Basically, what had happened was that was where the fella went out drinking with boys out on the highway, because the highway is the drinking area. You got the Walkup, not Warhope, Walkup, Roadhouse, and the Devil's Marbles Hotel, I think it's called. And you had that weird little joint that's set up like aliens. I can't. What's it called? Anyway,
yeah, it was.
Yeah, that place. Anyway, there was another roadhouse.
My car got flooded.
Yes, yeah. So a weird little roadhouse, just a bloody weird joint. Anyway, that was a big drinking area because there was a licensed premises and there was areas around that were Crown land, so people from dry communities could go there and drink. Ali Karung was a pretty big dry community, about 1,500 people, and they'd all go out there and that was their drinking spot. So anyway, this fella's out there with a couple of mates who his wife's never met, and he rang his missus to come and get him from Ali Karung. She came out, picked him up, middle of the night, drove back. She's got kids at home. As they're driving back, he's in the front seat, she's driving. These blokes who she doesn't know are in the back. And one of the blokes in the back apparently said something, and the wife laughed, And then the husband went silent. He went completely silent for the rest of the trip. Got back in there. He's then accused Mum of sleeping with those two, and she goes, never met them, and you brought them home. I don't know who they are. I've never met them in my life. In his drunken stupor, he's proceeded to bash her within an inch of his life with a claw hammer, and then raped her, and then woken up the next day and realised that she's nearly dead. And I think he sought help, or somebody else sought help on her behalf because he was hungover and passed or whatever it was. That was some of the most evil offending I've ever seen. And even in the interview, he didn't care. It's like, she's my wife. I'm pretty sure she's screwing that bloke. Whatever happened to her, I don't care. It was just evil. And you didn't get a lot of evil from that. You got a lot of stupidity and you got a lot of recklessness, but you didn't get evil. And that's something that sticks on my head. Of all the jobs, oh my God, the Tennant Creek, the jobs were just, they just rolled.
It was one after the other after the other. And you know, we could sit here. You can do an entire podcast on causes, drivers, and triggers of those problems. And you know, I've written papers on that stuff. And still, there's no direct line, easy answer. There's a lot of do-gooding people that come from southeast of this country who think they know the answers to these things. Most of them who come and spend more than 6 weeks living up there will get a different viewpoint on the world, and usually leave dejected and broken because those simple answers they thought they wrote their doctorate and thesis on just don't actually work in reality. No. But it's interesting you say that, Damo. Look, there definitely is that time when you turn up to a job and you know it's just been stupidity and a brain snap that's caused what's going on. And then there's those jobs you turn up and you see the face of evil. Now, I'm a proud man of faith. I believe in good and evil, and I believe that I have literally looked into the eyes of pure evil in some of these jobs, and it's like if you walk away from it and say I'm comfortable with that, then there's something wrong with you, and I'll put my hand on my heart and say that, because that's the stuff that keeps me awake. When we talk about PTSD, look, I think, to be honest, all of us suffer from PTSD. We just have learnt to deal with it differently. Yeah. I remember it was an ambulance paramedic that spoke to me back when I was an airport firefighter for a while. It was a guy that did some training with us and paramedics, and he just said, "There's one thing that you need to understand is that people will often say to you, oh, you must get used to dealing with this stuff." See, that's a lie. You never, ever, ever get used to it. What you get used to is how your body deals with it, how your mind deals with it. And I think that having the right people around you, that camaraderie, that stuff that the modern day policing model is trying to kill, is what stops that PTSD. It's when you go into your shell and you go alone and you don't get that debrief session. Look, and I'm not one that encourages drinking as a resolution for all problems, because it just isn't. I've seen that cause more problems than not. Yeah. But being able to communicate and talk with people. Here's another one. Don't go home and talk to your wife about it. She doesn't need to hear about it. Let me tell you something. The smartest thing you could ever do as a cop is make your wife your best friend and tell her. If I made any mistakes, it was trying to shield my family from stuff that they could help me with better than anybody else. And for me, having the ability to be able to debrief probably helps you deal with what those things are. So when I look back now, like, I don't get night sweats and wake up with stuff, but I definitely see there's something about the eyes of somebody who has got pure evil going on that I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and see. And that's terrifying. I know this has gotten somber, but it's very real. And I think people out there need to realise there just are really bad people who have really bad stuff going on inside of them. And that, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what the fix is. But anybody who sits there and says everybody is basically good is just nonsense.
Naive. No, they're just totally naive.
That starts with me. Like, the greatest realisation I made was that I'm not basically good. I want to be, and I strive to be every day. But if we realise we're all basically bad and our job is to control that badness, we get better. Some people just can't control it. The badness takes over, they get worse and worse. And in these circumstances, there is no explanation. One of the most frustrating things for me as a detective is not understanding the why. Like when you get to the end of a job, I can prove somebody did something, I can prove this happened, but not ever understanding why it happened. It's that's the closure that you don't get that becomes frustrating. I don't know whether you boys feel that, but that for me was something I found very frustrating.
One thing you mentioned there, sorry, that I found that I had to do the opposite was, and it was only because she told me.
Yeah.
In Catherine and Tennant Creek and all the rest of it, we had a support structure, and I know you were never a big drinker. I know that, and I know that we're big drinkers. But I'll tell you what we didn't, as in me and Schultzy, we're always big drinkers. One thing we never did, boys. One thing we never did was, and this is the difference. I never went home and medicated with alcohol. That never, ever occurred. What we did was we went to the police club, and quite often we didn't say much for a bit. We just, especially those really bad jobs, sometimes we didn't say much. Schultzy said this before as well, because he watched it better than I did. I didn't actually realise this. I remember that job we mentioned earlier, the little girl with the head. And we've done an episode, so I'll digress shortly. We did an episode where we did our top 2 worst jobs. The job you just spoke about was tied number 2. I just chose a different job.
Yeah.
That job, that little girl's head, I will never forget what that looked like for the rest of my life. That is burned there.
Yep.
The screams that came out of those family members, I will never forget that.
Nah.
When we went back to the police club, we were silent for about 10, 15 minutes, and you'll shout, mate, and I'll go and get him. And then we started talking about it, and I reckon probably an hour later, someone laughed at something.
Yeah.
It was not the job. Shit, no, not the job. But someone laughed at something.
Yep.
And what we'd done in that little period of time was we'd normalised our experience, and we'd shared that experience. So the core group that had gone through that, uniform and detectives, because there was detectives multiple, there wasn't just me. There was a couple of us that went through that. I'll never forget the GD's copper. She said, "I don't know how you do this shit," and she came to the club later and bawled her eyes out. And then she had a laugh an hour later. So that was a healing experience. That was us, a shared moment. We just shared the moment. We shared our experience. Any reaction was the correct reaction. It didn't matter what happened in that little space. But there was alcohol involved. Not ridiculous. There was alcohol involved. Had we done nothing and gone home and cracked a bottle of scotch and poured that down our neck, that's not good. You're digging your grave doing that. That's a very quick way to end your life.
You're correct. Yeah.
But sorry, you go.
Yeah. No. I listen. I agree with you completely. And that's the camaraderie that I'm talking about that's missing, and it's missing with the closure of clubs.
Yeah.
And look, it's man. There was 2 more. There's a story I need to share in terms of carton story, Schultzy. But you just reminded me something. I'm really conscious of time, right? Because
No, don't be. That doesn't matter.
Just keep talking, Andy.
It just what you're talking about here, Damo, is correct. It's the right moment to share that emotion. It's those you literally. This is what I was talking about earlier when I say I think this is why we have such a zero tolerance of this victim mentality that is going on in the world at the moment, because we did meet with those victims, and that job alone, and it's one of many that was similar. I mean, we could spend hours and hours talking about different jobs, but I will never forget speaking with the parents of that young girl. They came in. I had to brief with them. I had to debrief. I had to speak to them about stuff like I had to talk to Dad about what he did. I mean, he was driving the car.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you do that? You've got to have that conversation. You've got to have the conversation with them about what happens next, about what's going to happen from here, about I need to interview you. I need to get statements from you because we have an investigation, and you've got to somehow find the human side of that and share with them and listen to that. Like there is no grief, I don't think, on the planet that can match the grief of someone who loses a child.
No, you're right.
And you know, oftentimes now my wife can't understand why I get so. The one thing that triggers me is anything that's related to the kids. I get over protective about it, and it's because of those moments. It's
Oh,
those
mate.
moments when you deal with that you can't forget. Um, and they are burnt, Damo.
Mm.
We spoke earlier today, not on recording, about anchors that anchor our memory. They're the things. They're the things that anchor our memory, right?
Mm.
um, those moments when you're etched and spoken about. Um, but look, listen. I'll tell you an endearing story because it's personal and it just there's another thing that happens with the territory, and that is that only someone from the Northern Territory will understand this. But there is no 6 degrees of separation in the Northern Territory. There's one bordering on two.
Yeah.
It is 1,500 kilometres from Alice Springs to Darwin. I've done that trip more times than I care to remember. I have never stopped at a roadhouse where I haven't bumped into somebody that I knew. Now,
Yeah.
that is inconceivable for most people to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That those roadhouses are spaced every 300 and 400 kilometres. They're a long way apart, and they are in the middle of nowhere.
Mm.
And you will meet somebody invariably there. So meeting somebody coincidentally is not out of order. But let me tell you a story. My youngest child was born in Darwin. So my oldest was born um, in Darwin, but grew up in Catherine. My middle child was born in Alice Springs. Yeah, grew up in Alice and Darwin, and then my youngest was born um, in Darwin, in the middle of a cyclone. So that explains part of her personality now. But anyway, my wife, we know how hard the work is, Damo, right? As a husband, being in the delivery room, it's very hard.
Oh, mate,
And
brutal. Yeah.
our wives, hey, listen, I'm not going to get too scored on that, but I'm all for sitting in the waiting room with a cigar, waiting to be told. That experience is not a pleasurable one for me. But in any case, we're in the delivery room, and I won't go into the sort of details of where we're at and we're going on. But anyway, midwives change as they come in and out. My wife doesn't have long labours; they're generally fairly quick. And anyway, but she was there for a changeover of midwives. The midwife came in, and I knew, immediately recognised her, and then she recognised me, and we were trying to work out what it was, and then the penny dropped. So there was a job that happened in the mid 2000s, or late, probably 2008 or 9, in Darwin, where there was a house fire, and there was a young boy that was so that it was a deliberately lit fire, and there was a young boy that burned alive. And I won't go into names because the names are still relevant and raw. But the mum and mum had to be stopped by the neighbours because they could hear the kid screaming inside. She couldn't get in to get to him, and they were holding her back. It was a very tragic story, unbelievably tragic. And I just happened to be, I wasn't at major crime at the time. I was working with the command TAC team, but we located and arrested the offender, and went through that process. And so I'd had dealings with her as the victim at the time. And it turns out that this mum is now the midwife while I've got my baby there. And so in a moment I went, oh, I know who you are. And she immediately hugged me because at the time we'd formed that bond at the victim, as the victim with that person. And then you can imagine the emotions that go on. I then realise I'm now in a delivery room. She's the midwife, and we're about to deliver a child. And my relationship to this woman is because she lost a child. And you're going to find this hard to believe, boys, but I went speechless. I didn't know what to say. And I looked at her, and she just immediately picked up on it, and like tears were streaming down her eyes. And she said, "No, it's okay. You don't understand. This is a beautiful moment. This is meant to be, that you were there for me when I lost my boy, and I'm now here for your wife." And she ended up staying on past her shift ending to help deliver my youngest child. It was a moment, and I mean, it's actually the first time I've recounted this story where I haven't teared up. Like, I literally lost it in that room at that moment. It was just a moment that you have with with a victim, and people just don't realise this. Hey, about there's lots of exciting stories we can tell. The fun stuff. We can talk car pursuits all night and how much fun they are. We can talk high risk warrants and kicking indoors and high risk arrests and all that stuff that goes on. But it's those moments that you look back and you remember that those times spent with people at the worst period of time in their lives.
Yeah.
So many of them.
Mate,
And
that's the
somber
thing.
story. Sorry.
Well, it's funny, as we get older, all that hard-hitting adrenaline, all that, yeah, we still talk about it. Of course we do. But that stuff becomes more heartfelt. I look back now, I've held plenty, especially as a coroner's constable. I delivered some terrible death messages in Alice Springs. I remember holding people, and I remember, like, Jesus Christ, I'm nearly their life support system at this point. Like, they've lost control of their body at times, and I'm holding them, I'm giving them grounding, like, we're still here, breathe, like, you're going through a moment, but you got to breathe, so, but mate, we always do the full roller coaster on the old podcast, as you know. That's just how it rolls.
Mate, I'll bring you back to one last story just because it's a good way to lightheartedly end this one, and you just reminded me when you said coroner's Connie, but it was very fitting that Damo ended up as a coroner's Connie because Damo, for most who don't know, has an uncanny, he's a hell of a lot smarter than he gives himself credit for.
Yeah.
But very, very bright guy. And what he knows, he should have been a doctor. He genuinely should have been a doctor. And his knowledge, his medical knowledge is unreal. And that's what made you such a good coroner's Connie. But you see if you remember this job, Damo. But we got one, speaking of obscure jobs, we got a job called to an old people's home to deal with the death of an old person. I won't even mention sex because just in case family members pick up on this, but it was an old person that had died in this old people's home. I think, well, why are we getting called to this? And then they started to come out with circumstances that, this person was old and yes, they were sick, but the circumstances in which they died were a bit obscure. And down we trot, and Damo's down there. Damo knows this, so he's good. He's good on the medical stuff. But I don't know that anything would prepare us for this. We get there, and we're going, what is that smell? Like, it's not, this body hasn't been here long enough for this smell to be here. It's this horrendous smell. And then we look at this, and that this person's mouth, deceased person's mouth is full of something, and we can't quite work it out. And we get down, we get a bit closer. Well, it turns out that this person had an obstructed bowel and literally died of being full of shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the job. That was Damo, and I'll never forget that job. That was one we went back later, and not at the expense of this particular individual or their family at all, but one of the more humorous recollections ever.
Absolutely.
That there was a person who literally had shit coming out of their mouth. They had literally died of being full of shit.
Yes. Sorry, mate, I would never have remembered that ever, but I do now. So yeah, but I think the reason that you with the build up was because I'm the one who went, that's feces. Like, they've got feces, but it's not. It's, and I said it. I can't remember exactly. I said it's basically digested feces. There's a mixing process going on, but yeah, basically the person can't poo, and eventually that's going to end your days. And anyway, the nurses, they're like, oh, we're not sure. We didn't know what went on. It's a bit weird. All the rest of it. I'm looking at it and going, there's nothing weird about it. Like, that's poo. So, yeah. So anyway, it was... Yeah, gee, good memory. Bloody hell, Bedwell. You're better than me.
Listen,
I got nothing. Like,
they come back when we start talking. But look, boys, very, very conscious of time. Schultzy, I know you wanted me to tell a cartonable story.
Yeah, mate. I'm sure you got a few.
But the amount of stupid shit that I've done in my life, Schultzy, cannot be counted. It is there is no question. There is any number of stories, but you did actually remind me, and it seems to be because we all worked in Katherine. We've centered a lot on Katherine tonight. There's a hell of a lot more of the territory, and I actually spent more time in Darwin than I did in Katherine, and actually more time in Alice than I did in Katherine. But there was some funny times. But yes, we did get involved in community a lot there. That's what I loved a lot about Catherine. But there was one particular event that I will never forget. There was an annual golf day, corporate golf day, which was always a good event. But this particular year, it had turned into a fundraiser. There was a lovely young girl from town who was diagnosed with leukemia, and they were raising money for her. And so we had a whole lot of fine systems in place. And we were playing the Pink Lady rule. For the non-golfers, Pink Lady is when you play Ambrose golf as a team, and you play with one pink ball. And the idea is one person must play with that ball for the whole hole. And at this particular day, if you lost the pink ball, it cost your team $1,000. To a good cause, of course. But anyway, that day, our team was made up with some ring-ins. I had some African ring-ins. They'd come down from Darwin. Uncle Pete was one, who now lives down here, and I'll remind him and make him listen to this, who is a giant of a man, an ex-Air Force PT sergeant. He stands about 6'5". He probably weighs 140 kilos. Giant of a man. And maybe not so legally used to brew his own spirits, and he made this absolutely ridiculously mean chili vodka, which he'd brought down there for us, and insisted that we all sip from this bottle before the game started. So before we'd even teed off, we'd drunk that bottle. And now, if I remember correctly, one of our then superintendents decided he wanted a part of this, and it nearly killed him when he took the mouthful of that chili vodka. But yeah, we downed that bottle of chili vodka. So before we'd even teed off, we teed off on hole one. Now, I don't remember who hit the Pink Lady. I don't think it was me, but someone hit the Pink Lady.
It was probably
and if you
me.
remember to the first tee at the Catherine Golf Club at the time had a lake off to the left.
Yeah.
And anyway, this ball sailed straight into that lake, and we've gone, oh, no, man, it's hole one, and we've lost our Pink Lady. Now, we got down there, and I went, nah, I'm not having any of this. So I dutifully stripped down, bollocks, and dived into the lake and swam out, and sure enough, there was the Pink Lady in the middle of this lake, quite clear. So I dived down. It was deeper than I thought it would be. Picked up the Pink Lady, and I think from memory I put it in my teeth, and I came up and I popped my head up at the surface expecting to see everyone standing on the bank, but no, there's Schultzy, Uncle Pete, and Uncle Pete's son stark as on the bank, all diving in after me into the lake. And now we're all four of us bollocks in the lake coming in at now. That should have been the end of the story.
Yeah.
But as we know, corporate golf days start with people starting on different holes. On the hole coming the other way was one of our fellow detectives from the office, young lady, who was well known, a local Catherine girl, grew up that way, local station girl. She's standing on the bank of the river, and she's going, "Hey, Andy," and she's got my clothes on the bank, which was bad enough. I thought, I'll come and get those from you, and I'll go to swim over there. But standing with her was the reporter from it was either the Catherine Times or NT News. Yeah.
Times,
And I can remember, apart from getting out and the bulrushes tickling my little pecker, I got out. And the first thing I hear, other than that particular detective and her female counterpart trotting off down the fairway with my clothes. Well, I don't think it was just my clothes. I think it was all of our clothes. But,
Yeah.
And then was this reporter, this young girl who was a reporter, going, Andy, I don't know what to say, but it's not that cold. She just burnt me on the spot.
Oh, too good. And by the media, no less.
I think I had to go halfway back to the club, bollocks,
Yeah.
before that particular said detective gave me back my clothes.
Well, mate,
so
the funny thing about that is you just climbed out and you didn't care. You just started walking back to the clubhouse after your clothes, like just swinging in the breeze.
Well,
I
were you
was
swinging or were you bobbling? Was it swinging or bobbling in the breeze?
dude. I can't comment on it. All I know is that it's not small; it's just user friendly.
I'm so glad you said that. I was about to say you coined a great term, and I'm so glad you said it. Oh, mate.
Hey, Andy, there is also another part of that story, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but
Oh,
apparently there was some local cops, and I know she listens to it, and her husband definitely listens to it. Damo and I caught up with them in Darwin last time, and they were tipping out piss, and of course, it's just a wire fence between the golf course and the outside, and of course they were drinking in public, so they were tipping the piss out. And then they got notified by the indigenous locals going, "Hey, they're naked." And she just turned around and said, "Don't worry about them, they're police."
God. Oh, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I do know. As you do, we ended up with mates from different media outlets at time. But there was definitely a conversation I had somewhere down the track from one of our NT News colleagues who had mentioned that there were still photos floating around for a while. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, they are still there.
no doubt, man, news services don't give up on those things. I'm
No.
certainly not going to give them up easily. But yeah, that was. I mean, that is one of many of the cartonable offences I'm probably due over time. But
Yeah.
that was definitely one of the funnier, more memorable moments of my time
Oh,
in Catherine.
Yeah.
yeah. Mate, that golf club was a great release. Yeah. We had
It
some
was. It was
bloody
good
fun
fun.
times there, and hours on the golf course playing, absolutely making a disgrace of the very noble sport that is golf.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, I
uh,
loved them. So, yeah.
but Schultzy, you're not off the hook either, mate.
No, no, mate. Apparently, and I've got to apologise. I said almost a year ago, so it was April 25, and I said to this bloke got in contact with us, Paul Bruggen, that I would give him a shout out, and I failed to do so. He reminded me, and he said that's definitely a carton. And look, yes, I'm going to have to put my hand up, and yes, I will owe a carton. At our next live show, I will definitely put a carton on the bar for that. So he's going to have to come along.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So I think he's actually in the southeastern region of Queensland. So mate, when we have one up here, he'll get a personal invite. We might even drag him up on stage. I think. And,
I think so.
Yeah, and I'll pay the carton at that time.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, mate, Andy, look, on this podcast, we have colleagues, we have friends, and then very occasionally we have family.
Yeah,
So, mate, tonight it's been family. It's just been, it's just brought the memories back. I knew it was going to be good. And the thing is, you talk about, we spoke about some somber things, but that's what we do. That's the job. So the whole thing's a roller coaster. So that's why the podcast is a roller coaster, because the job is a roller coaster. That laughter was so important. It was medicine, mate. It fixed our soul after dealing with some of the most catastrophic tragedies that occur in peacetime. That's just how it is, mate. That's life. That's why I tell people all the time on the podcast, don't feel bad about speaking about bad shit. We sort of start light, we get deep, then we finish light. That's just that's life. That's how it is. So, and it's kind of, I even got a bit affected. I'm not forgotten, but I hadn't thought about that job for a while, and it caught back that it was, I remember tossing up between the two jobs I was going to tell, and that was the other job. That would be my equal second worst job I've ever been to, would have been that job. And the fact that it was only my second worst job is telling something.
yeah,
Yeah,
Because it
100%.
doesn't get worse than that. So
Yeah, look, we haven't touched on. There's a number of things, mate,
yeah.
and we haven't touched on Cat and Cam. Cam
Yeah.
is something I'll never get out of my head. There's that'll wreck me forever,
Yeah.
and forever change my viewpoint on even looking, even operating computers. It just gives me
Yeah.
heebie-jeebies.
I'll just explain that for people who don't know what that is. So, Child Abuse Task Force was the CAT, CAT, and Cam is child abuse material. I've covered that before. I personally have never, ever, ever seen child abuse material, and I thank God every single day that I never have.
Yeah, it's awful. So, yeah, people don't realise, but generally speaking, the people that work in CAT teams, it's far too much exposure. So, generally speaking, other detectives have to do what's called the classification. So, I'll let you work out what that means, but
Yep.
it basically means you classify what's on there in terms of its severity. And there's stuff there that you just can't erase from your brain. And I take my hat off to those people who work in those bits. You know, there's a few people that we talk about as people often say, "Oh, you guys had the hardest job." No, we
No
didn't.
way.
In policing, anyone who worked in child abuse, domestic violence, Schultzy, and I know you spent a lot of time in there, that's hardcore. To me, that's real policing. That's real victims and putting real offenders behind bars. Same with Child Abuse Task Force. But nothing. I take my hat. I'm going to use this here. I know this is a cop show, but for me, nurses and ambos are the two that deal with the worst. And I always say, when somebody gets too much for me, I can always lock them up.
Yep.
Nurses have to keep being nice, and so do paramedics. So
That's right.
And we went back to Somber. We were supposed to say that.
It's all good. It's real.
I need to close this out by giving more details about the Damo dream.
Yeah. I'm concerned. If you're having erotic dreams about me, you got more issues than we thought.
And I'll tell you something though, Damo. I never minded. We spent a lot of time sleeping very close to each other in swags and on the floors of police stations and the floors of dongers and cattle stations and all sorts. Thankful Damo wasn't a snorer. There's colleagues, we won't mention names, who were awful, we used to have to drop off down the road to camp.
Yeah. Well, there was one
Especially on those SED trips.
I won't name him, and we're talking about the same guy. We didn't have to drop him off; he dropped himself off.
Yeah.
And mate, thank Christ it's not now, because I snore like a bastard. I sound like a misfiring chainsaw in the forest.
Yeah, maybe I was just tired enough, Damo. Never.
Oh, yeah. So, Andy, I think you and I think probably Zach Rolfe are going to have to be permanent members of the Two Ordinary Cops team. And probably Jake Lacey too, I'd say. Like, they're the three that are probably going to be permanent members. You kind of exceeded it. I knew this was going to be good, but I think you've exceeded expectations, and we're going to have to get you back, mate. Like, it's just
definitely. Well, honestly, Andy, one of our biggest ones and one of our most popular ones was talking about leadership. So maybe we'll get you back on to
mate, I'm passionate. Prepare yourselves a big soapbox for me to stand on, but it's a passion topic. And let me say, as an anchor to that one, as a precursor, I do not regard myself as a great leader. I love leadership. I've studied it. I did a master's in leadership. I've studied it. I love studying great leaders. I love remembering great leaders, and there's some amazing characteristics and stuff to talk about. So yeah, leadership's it's a great topic, and it's a subject that's massively lacking in our world at the moment.
Definitely.
Not just in policing. Let's not even start with politics. But we are missing leaders.
That's funny, Andy. I was going to mention that before.
I'll tell you what we'll do. Before we sign this off, I can't let that comment go unchecked. All right, I'm going to correct you. You were a great leader. You are a great leader, mate. Yeah. We had a ball. And I don't blow smoke up anyone's ass, but you had the ability in the depths of the night to call a team together and have them turn up with their eyeballs half shut, with a smile on their face going, "Where do you want us, mate?" And we didn't call you boss. We called you mate.
Yeah.
We knew who was running the show. We turned up and we got into it. And the thing was, we didn't get told to go and do something. We're like, fuck, try and keep up with this bastard, will you? So I'll correct you on that, mate. I look back on the fondest times, especially in investigations, because that's where we had our relationship, and that was where it is. And I smile, mate, because we did extraordinary work, and we did it with a smile. And we did it with a smile and eyeballs on our cheeks from sheer exhaustion.
Yeah. No, I agree, mate. They're kind words, Damo. But leaders are only as good as their followership. And I had great followers, great first adapters, great people working with me. And that's what makes great leadership. So, yeah, you two were highly amongst, and I agree. I agree with the sentiment. This is family. It always will be. I love the fact that the three of us can just strike up a conversation like it was yesterday,
Oh,
no matter how long it's been apart. And
And years, yeah.
that's really what it should be about, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, enough of this circle jerk. That's us for the week.
You can bring the sayos next time, Damo.
Dearie me. And on that note, folks, Schultzy, what do you got?
Yeah, mate, I reckon we'll finish this one up, but there's many more yarns, especially some funny stuff that went on as well. Leadership, yeah, Andy, mate, it was one of the, like I was just thinking before, when you see your name pop up on the phone, yep, we're ready to go. So, yeah loved it.
Yeah.
You're definitely
That's
one
good.
of our best sergeants we ever worked under. So,
Yeah.
and learn a lot from as well.
Yeah. And took a lot from and then adapted into our own leadership styles and then got recognition for our own leadership styles. And I went, we just did what Bedwell used to do. So it was
Heaven bloody help you, but yeah,
Yeah.
you both of you were great leaders. So I we're back to circle jerking again. Stop this.
yeah,
business.
fuck all this. Right, boys, we'll see you later. We're back next
Hey,
week.
awesome.
We'll have Andy back on. We're going to get Andy back on because I think the leadership thing is definitely worth delving into. And I've spoken to you offline about this stuff. And, mate, what you're saying is so operationally correct. And forget policing. It's correct for life.
Exactly.
But it's also very correct for business. My current role, I train firefighters, mostly bush firefighters, but I train a lot in the incident management, emergency management scene, and it's all the same shit. So, mate, we have to get you back on for that because I think that would be marvellous.
Yeah, definitely. And Andy, mate, when we actually finish, just stay on the system because it has to update and upload.
Yeah.
And we can have a chat offline about some
No
of the
worries.
stories we couldn't talk about on the podcast.
Well, that's it. That's the two ordinary cops. It's the three ordinary cops. Once again, we've said it before and we'll say it again. The three ordinary cops here today.
Yep,
And I've had a ball. This has been great.
it has
Yeah.
been. Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But
Thanks, gents.
all right, mate. Well, we'll see you again soon. And this is Two Ordinary Cops signing off. We'll see you next week.